Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're locking in on the savage world of Killer Instinct.
Yeah, get ready for some CCC combo breakers.
Exactly. We've got a pretty hefty collection of sources here, basically charting its whole journey. You know, from that 1994 arcade smash right up to the 2013 reboot and, well, everything after. Our mission really is to dissect what makes this fighting franchise so gripping, what's fueled its staying power for, like, decades.
Well, what's fascinating right off the bat, I think, is how it started. The visuals were the big hook initially, right?
Oh, yeah.
Those pre-rendered 3D graphics and a 2D fighter. That was 1994. Groundbreaking stuff.
And yet, it's kept this dedicated following across so many different console generations.
Totally. We're talking Super Nintendo, N64, Xbox One, PC, even the Switch recently. That's some serious longevity. It's pretty rare, honestly.
Absolutely. And looking through all this research, the articles, the notes, it's just clear there's always been this innovative spirit driving it forward. Okay, let's get right into it. How did the original Killer Instinct even, come to be?
Right, so the initial idea, the spark, actually came a little earlier. Ken Lobb, he's a key name, we'll hear a lot. He had this concept called Melee.
Melee, like the Smash Bros. Game.
Different Melee. This was back when he was at Namco around 93.
Okay.
It didn't get the green light there, but the idea stuck with him. When he moved to Nintendo of America, that's where it found a home.
Yeah, I see. And that's where Rare comes in, the British developer.
Exactly. Nintendo paired Lobb's concept with Rare. And Rare, well, they were ambitious. They basically wanted to go head-to-head with Mortal Kombat.
Wow, aiming high right from the start. And this led to a pretty unusual partnership for Nintendo at the time, didn't it?
It really did. Nintendo, known for being more family-friendly back then, actually made a licensing deal with Midway.
Midway. The Mortal Kombat guys.
The very same.
Yeah.
For arcade development using this early Ultra 64 hardware, Killer Instinct was the first big game out of that deal.
That's a huge shift for Nintendo, getting into more violent games.
Yeah, it seems like they were maybe seeing the writing on the wall, anticipating a need for more mature stuff.
And Rare put together quite the team for the arcade version.
Oh, yeah. You had Chris Tilston, Mark Betteridge, Kevin Bayless doing design. Betteridge was also the head programmer.
And the music. Can't forget the music.
Never. Robin Beanland, Graham Norgate. That soundtrack is just iconic. Pure adrenaline.
The hardware itself was pretty cutting edge too, right? For an arcade machine.
It really was. This Ultra 64 platform used the N64 file format, had a 64-bit MIPS CPU, but the kicker was the internal hard drive.
A hard drive in an arcade cabinet in '94.
Yeah, not common at all. Most use ROMs. The hard drive let them cram in way more graphical detail. That's a big part of why it looks so stunning in the arcades. It was a statement.
So the arcade version is a smash hit. Then, just a year later, 1995, it hits the Super Nintendo. The N64 console itself wasn't even out yet.
Right, it was a huge SNES release, often came bundled with that killer cut CD.
I remember that, and the black cartridge. It looked so different.
Totally stood out. But yeah, bringing that arcade power to the SNES, that was a challenge.
I bet. What kind of compromises did they have to make?
Well, the SNES just couldn't handle everything. Graphics were less complex, character sprites got smaller, and those cool 3D panning backgrounds from the arcade, they became more like standard 2D parallax scrolling on the SNES.
Still, quite an achievement. Who led that porting effort?
That was Steve Patrick, the head programmer. Graham Norgate came back for the music, thankfully, kept that essential vibe.
And they didn't stop there. They even squeezed it onto the Game Boy.
They did, though predictably, that version had even more significant cuts.
Like what?
Characters like Cinder and Riptor were gone completely, and the fighters who were there had simplified movesets, for the Game Boy's 2 buttons.
Makes sense.
Gary Richards handled the design for that one. Kerry Gunn, Kevin Bayless, Dean Smith did art. Robert Harrison programmed it, and Norgate did the music again. They even threw in a little metallic logo pendant. A nice touch.
So the original KI hits hard, innovative gameplay, combos, pushing tech. But Rare wasn't done. 1996 rolls around Killer Instinct 2 in arcades.
And then Killer Instinct Gold on the N64.
Right. What was the thinking behind KI2? What do they want to change or improve?
The arcade team for KI2 was actually smaller. Lee Schnorman and Ken Lobb were leading it. Their big design goal was, and I quote, reward the aggressor.
Reward the aggressor. So less defensive play.
Exactly. They wanted to push players to be more relentless, always moving forward. They used the same arcade hardware, but Kevin Bayless redesigned the characters a bit to fit the new time travel story.
The time travel plot. And the music.
Robin Beanland was the main composer this time. Graham Norgate did some early stuff, but moved on to other projects. Martin Hollis, who later did GoldenEye, was involved briefly too.
And didn't KI2 see some characters disappear and new ones arrive?
It did. Big omissions like Idol, Thunder, Cinder Riptor, which disappointed some fans.
Yeah, bet.
But we got Gargos, Kim Woo, Maya, Tusk. Really cool new additions that fit that whole ancient time travel vibe.
Okay, so KI2 hits arcades. Then comes Killer Instinct Gold for the brand new N64. They developed them side by side.
Pretty much simultaneously, yeah. Which must have been intense. The N64 team was reportedly just 7 people.
7 people. Wow.
Chris Tilston, Mark Betteridge, Kevin Bayless were producers. Tilston also programmed. Bayless did design and art. Robin Beanlin was back on music duties.
But the N64 cartridge format meant downgrades from the arcade?
Oh, for sure. The full motion video sequences, gone. Some voiceovers, cut. The cool branching endings from the arcade, simplified.
Trade-offs, I guess.
But on the plus side, the N64 stages were actually rendered in full 3D. You got dynamic camera angles, which was different from the arcade's static backgrounds. They used compression tech to squeeze it all in.
So the goal was basically arcade gameplay, same roster, but adapted for the N64's strengths and weaknesses.
Pretty much. Faithful gameplay was key. And fun fact, there was apparently a completed SNES version of KI2 that just never got released.
No way. A lost SNES KI2.
Crazy.
Okay, so the 90s were wild for KI. Then silence. A long silence. Until 2013, the reboot. Huge deal, Xbox One launch title.
Passive. Double Helix Games handled that first season.
What was their approach? How did they bring KI back?
Well, Ken Lobb was still involved, supervising from Microsoft's side, and they got input from Rare, too. Double Helix used their own HEX engine.
HEX engine?
Yep. Their big focus was recapturing that aggressive feel, the deep combos, but also really listening to the community on balance and mechanics.
And technically.
They did something pretty cool. The game logic ran internally at 90 frames per second, but it rendered at 60.
Why 90?
Lower input lag makes the game feel super responsive, which is absolutely critical for fighters.
Makes sense. And they had a solid team leading this revival.
Definitely. People like Carlos Bustamante on programming, David Robert Donatucci heading up art, Michael Willett leading production, David Verfaele on design, David Hall leading character design, and Mick Gordon on music.
Mick Gordon. His soundtrack for that game is incredible. Modern, but still feels like KI.
Totally. Really captured the energy.
Now, Double Helix gets acquired by Amazon, right? So development shifts.
Exactly. Iron Galaxy Studios took over for seasons 2 and 3, and they've handled the support since, including the anniversary update.
Iron Galaxy has a great reputation in the fighting game community.
They really do. Microsoft still guided the story, but Iron Galaxy handled the core development. Chad Green became art director for Season 3. That's when we saw that big visual upgrade, the new lighting.
Right. Season 3 looked noticeably different.
Yeah. Kurt Tillmans, Adam Hart were key designers. Boyd Post directed the audio. Atlas Plug and Cell Dweller did the music for Season 3.
So Iron Galaxy's focus was?
Expanding the roster, lots of balancing, those technical improvements. They added new mechanics, too, like air breakers, air counters, stagger, flip out. And crucial, bringing it to Windows 10 and Steam.
Opening it up to more players.
Exactly. And that 10th anniversary update just recently with 4K support shows they're still committed.
Let's talk a bit more about the tech behind that 2013 reboot. You mentioned the HEX engine and that 90 FPS internal logic, but the netcode, that was a really big deal, wasn't it?
Absolutely pivotal. The rollback netcode.
Explain rollback a bit. Why was it so important?
Okay, so traditional online fighting games often use delay-based netcode. It basically waits for inputs from both players before showing the action. If there's lag, the whole game feels sluggish, unresponsive.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Rollback is different. It predicts what your opponent will do next based on their last inputs and shows you that immediately. If the prediction was wrong when the actual input arrives, the game quickly rolls back time by a few frames and corrects the state.
So it feels smoother, even with some latency.
Massively smoother. It happens so fast you usually don't even notice the correction. It makes online play feel much closer to offline play. Killer Instinct 2013, with help from Tony Cannon of GGPO fame.
The guy behind GGPO.
Wow. Yep. They were one of the first big fighting games to really nail rollback netcode. It set a new standard, absolutely critical for its competitive scene and just lasting appeal online.
It really changed the game for online fighters. Okay, it's clear these games were built by some incredibly talented people. Let's spotlight some of them, starting back with Rare in the 90s.
Right, Rare. Founded by Tim and Chris Stamper, who approved the initial concept. Chris was also a producer on KI2. But the core creative force, Ken Lobb with the initial idea.
And the designers.
Chris Tilston, Mark Betteridge, and especially Kevin Bayliss for those iconic character designs. They really shaped the game's identity. Mark Betteridge and Chris Tilston also led the programming side.
And that pre-rendered style was their signature, right? Made possible by that arcade hard drive.
Exactly. That visual style, the combo focus, and adapting KI2 to the N64 with just 7 people, that's impressive work. Testament to their skill.
Then flash forward to 2013. Double Helix takes over for the reboot. Ken Lobb's still involved, though, right?
Yeah.
Guiding it.
Yeah, Ken Lobb, Adam Isgreen, Michael Donges at Microsoft provided that essential link, making sure it felt like KI, but was still modern.
And the Double Helix leads.
Michael Willett, David Verfari, Carlos Bustamante, Robert Donatucci, David Hall. They did a great job modernizing the gameplay. Instinct mode, shadow moves, and that crucial rollback netcode.
They really did revive it, even if some folks initially wanted more characters at launch.
True, but they built a fantastic foundation, which Iron Galaxy then took and ran with.
Right. Iron Galaxy.
Wow.
Known for their fighting game chops.
Definitely. Founded by Dave Lang, people like Adam Hart, Chad Green, Boyd Post, maybe Kurt Tillmans, Matt Kerr too. They brought that deep expertise.
Their focus seemed to be refinement and expansion.
Yeah. More characters, constant balancing based on feedback, that Season 3 visual upgrade with the new lighting, plus the PC ports and keeping the game alive with things like the anniversary update. Their experience was vital for polishing those complex mechanics.
Let's shift to the art and visuals. That's always been a huge part of KI's identity. And such a dramatic evolution, too.
Oh, absolutely. The original, with those pre-rendered 3D models, turned into 2D sprites. Kevin Bayliss on characters, Chris Seaver and Tim Stamper on backgrounds. It had this unique, almost claymation look.
And the hard drive let them pack in so much detail for the time.
Exactly. KI2 kept that style, Bayliss redesigning characters for the time travel plot. KI Gold on N64 was the transition point, true 3D backgrounds, dynamic cameras.
But compromises elsewhere.
Yeah, less animation fidelity, stuff like that. Because of the N64 cartridge limits, it was a trade-off.
And then the 2013 reboot just goes full 3D.
Right. HEX engine power, Robert Donatucci as art director, David Hall leading character design. They went for a darker, more modern interpretation.
And Iron Galaxy evolved it further.
Yep, Chad Green leading the art for Season 3, especially that new lighting system. And it was great that Kevin Bayliss came back to design retro costumes.
Nice nod to the originals.
Totally. And 4K support on PC now?
Yeah.
It's come a long way visually.
Just as important as the sound, the music, the effects. The KI sound is unmistakable.
It really is. Robin Beanland and Graham Norgate on the original, that was their first big project for Rare, apparently.
Wow. Talk about starting strong.
High-energy rock, electronic beats, perfect fit. And the Killer Cut CD was huge.
A must-have.
Beanland mostly handled KI2's music. Grant Kirkhope chipped in, too. And the announcer, Chris Sutherland. CCC Combo Breaker. Legendary.
Absolutely iconic soundbite. So the reboot had big shoes to fill, audio-wise.
Huge. But Mick Gordon delivered for Seasons 1 and 2. Just killer remixes and new tracks, really dynamic stuff that reacts to the fight. Jean-Edouard Miclot was senior audio designer for S1.
And Season 3.
Atlas Plug and Seldwaller took over, bringing their own styles. And getting Chris Sutherland back as an optional announcer, genius move.
Yeah, fans loved that.
Boyd Post oversaw the audio direction for the whole reboot. Chase Ashbaker was supervising sound editor. That dynamic soundtrack was a really smart modern touch.
With such deep mechanics, players definitely wanted help mastering the game. Let's talk strategy guides. Especially back in the day, those physical books were gold.
Oh, totally essential before the internet really took off for games. For the original KI, Brady Games did a totally unauthorized Killer Instinct guide in '95.
Unauthorized. Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, probably meant they didn't have official Nintendo blessing, but it had moves, combos, profiles, even some behind-the-scenes tidbits. And the SNES manual itself had the basics, like explaining auto doubles.
What about KI2 and Gold?
Game Fan magazine did a guide for KI2 Gold. And that was the era where online FAQs started popping up on sites like Game FAQs, fan-made guides breaking down combo theory enders, character strats for KI Gold, invaluable stuff.
The 2013 reboot got a guide, too, from Prima Games. Sounds like they went all in.
They really did. It was this big hardcover ultra fan book, had retrospectives, developer interviews with Ken Lobb and others, tons of art, behind-the-scenes stuff.
More than just strategy, then.
Yeah, but it did have strategy, too. And cleverly, it included a living mobile guide, basically, an online component that got updated as the game got patched and new seasons came out, plus a Jago pullout guide. Very comprehensive for a modern, evolving game.
Killer Instinct also branched out beyond just games, comics, for instance.
Two different series, right?
Yep. First one was back in '96 from Armada Comics, part of Acclaim. A 3-issue miniseries adapting the original game's story Ultratech tournament, Idol, the main cast.
Did they do more?
Yeah, a couple of one-shots. Tiger Fury about Orchid's backstory, Brothers about Chief Thunder looking for Eagle. They were early attempts to flesh out the lore.
Then, much later, Dynamite Entertainment did another series, and this one's canon to the reboot.
That's right. Started in 2017. It picks up after Gargos' defeat in the 2013 game. Earth is messed up. There's this new group called the Coven causing trouble, fighting Ultratech.
So it continued the reboot story.
Exactly. Jago and Kim Woo, their powers are weaker, team up with the Night Guard, go into the astral plane. It gets pretty cosmic, dealing with deeper evils. Gargos is still a factor. It really built on the reboot's world.
And there was even a collectible card game. Back in the 90s, CCG boom. Yeah. Topps put one out in '96. Apparently it was Nintendo's first ever CCG. Used low-res images pulled straight from the arcade game. A fun little relic of that era.
The 2013 game also did something interesting with guest characters.
Oh yeah, bringing in fighters from other Microsoft IPs. Rash from Battletoads.
Nice rare connection there.
Arbiter from Halo. General Ram from Gears of War. It was a smart way to leverage those big names and draw in their fan bases.
Did KI characters ever show up elsewhere?
Not really, mostly fan requests. The crossover strategy seemed focused on bringing guests into KI. Though Chief Thunder's original design did get mentioned once in an article about Native American stereotypes in games. But yeah, mostly inbound guests for the reboot.
Let's untangle the narrative threads. The Killer Instinct lore has gotten surprisingly complex over the years. Start with the original saga, KI 1 and 2 Gold.
Okay, the original story fundamentally is about Ultratech, this shady corporation running the Killer Instinct tournament to test their tech and fighters. Their dimensional experiments accidentally release Idol, this two-headed demon lord from Limbo, who's the final boss.
And the characters all have their reasons for being there.
Right. Orchid's infiltrating Ultratech, Jago's guided by the tiger spirit to fight evil, Thunder's looking for his lost brother Eagle, Fulgore is Ultratech's killer cyborg. Everyone had a motive tied into Ultratech or escaping their experiment.
Then KI2 throws a wrench in things with time travel.
Big time. Idol's defeat messes with time, sends everyone 2,000 years into the past, and frees Gargos Idol's ancient rival.
So past meets future.
Yep. You have the future fighters like Jago, Orchid, TJ, Saberwolf, now with cyber arms, Fulgore MK2 versus new ancient warriors like Tusk, Maya, Kimwu, plus past versions of Gracious and Spinal. The goal becomes defeat Gargos, get back home, much more fantasy, higher stakes, and Orchid winning KI1 is what triggers it all.
Okay, then the 2013 reboot wipes the slate clean, sort of. Reimagines things.
Yeah, it's a rebooted universe, acknowledges the original tournament happened, but retcons things like Jago and Orchid being siblings. The story unfolds across the seasons.
How did Season 1 set things up?
Arcade modes built towards fighting Fulgore, with Shadow Jago as a secret boss hinting at Gargos. Character arcs focused on things like Jago questioning the tiger spirit, Orchid leading rebels against Ultratech, Saberwolf struggling with his curse, Thunder still seeking Eagle.
Season 2 brought in Araya, the head of Ultratech.
Right. Araya, this advanced AI CEO with an evolve or die philosophy. Season 2 deepened plots for TJ Combo seeking revenge, Maya accidentally freeing the sorcerer, Conra seeking power, Cinder becoming Araya's fiery agent.
And Season 3 was the big Gargos invasion.
Exactly. Facilitated by Araya and Conra, Gargos, the Shadow Lord from the astral plane, invades Earth. This brought in Kim Woo and Tusk, destined fighters against him, Maya's vampire sister Mira working for Gargos, and even Idol resurrected by Conra as Gargos' rival.
And the Shadow Lords mode expanded on all this.
Hugely. Let you fight Gargos' invasion, unlocked character dossiers, really fleshed out the world, introduced the astral plane, cosmic beings like Icorians versus Shadow Lords, shadow energy itself.
And the Dynamite comics continued this.
Yep. Canon story post-Gargos, ruined Earth, the Coven versus Ultratech, Jago and Kimwu weakened going into the astral plane. Became a much more layered, morally gray universe compared to the originals. Araya's philosophy, Canra's tragedy. Very cosmic.
Okay, let's break down the fight itself. The gameplay mechanics. That combo system is legendary.
It's the absolute core. You've got openers to start things off. Auto doubles KI Gold, standardize them based on button strength. Linkers to keep the chain going. Manuals harder timing, but harder to break. Less knockdown value in the reboot.
And then ways to finish the combo.
Enders. Cash out that potential damage. KI Gold had scaling enders, KI 2013 had different properties and shadow enders, and the flashy finishers, ultra combos, stage ultras in the reboot, even humiliations back in the original KI. It's intricate. Requires precision, strategy, especially with damage scaling in the new one.
But KI isn't just about offense. The defense, the combo breaker, that was revolutionary.
Absolutely game-changing. Giving the defender an active way to stop a combo. Huge. Original KI's rules were a bit fuzzy. Break gave you a buff. KI2 Gold simplified it. Punch breaks, kick auto-slinkers. Kick breaks, punch auto-slinkers.
And the 2013 reboot made it a mind game.
Totally. You had to guess the strength, light, medium, or heavy of the move you were trying to break using 2 buttons. Guess wrong. Locked out, vulnerable. Season 2 added air breakers. Season 3 changed breakers to cause a flip out, resetting neutral.
And then counter breakers.
Added in the reboot. If you predict your opponent will try to break, you hit the counter breaker input. If you're right, they get stunned and locked out for longer. A real psychological layer, the game within the game.
The reboot also added meters, Shadow Meter and Instinct Mode.
Yep, more strategic resources. Shadow Meter builds up, split into 2 bars, spend 1 bar for a shadow move and enhanced special, or spend meter on a shadow counter or reversal while blocking, made faster in Season 3.
And Instinct Mode.
Separate meter. Activate it with heavy punch plus heavy kick. Gives temporary buffs, move cancels, unique character boosts like Jago's health regen, and critically, it resets the knockdown value meter, letting you extend combos further.
What other key mechanics define KI over the years?
Well, the double health bars are pretty standard KI, except ARIS 3 in the reboot. Potential damage, that white recoverable health in KI 2013 added risk reward. The knockdown value KV meter in the reboot prevents infinites.
Easy.
Yeah, limits juggles. Instinct resets it though, and the guts mechanic reduces damage when you're near death. Season 3 added stagger and flip out states for more combo dynamics.
And technically, we already mentioned the rollback netcode and HEX engine for the reboot.
Crucial foundations for smooth play. You can also see the evolution from KI1 to KI2 Gold, adding super moves, a deeper ender system, more intuitive breakers, and then KI 2013 evolved across seasons. Air break counters, shadow ender scaling, manual restrictions, stagger flip out, balance tweaks, constant refinement.
So Killer Instinct clearly made waves. What's its biggest impact on the fighting genre overall?
Several things. Combo breakers, first mainstream use, huge influence on defensive mechanics of other fighters. The elaborate combo system itself, openers, autos, linkers, enders, ultras, popularized that flashy structured style.
Wow.
Pioneering online play with rollback in 2013. That pushed the whole genre forward.
Yeah.
The free-to-play seasonal model for the reboot was also pretty influential for monetization. And just the overall presentation, the visuals, the sound, that iconic announcer gave it a really strong identity.
Okay, we've talked innovation and gameplay. How did critics and players actually receive these games? What was the reception like?
The original arcade KI, huge critical acclaim, massive commercial hit. EGM called it the undisputed king.
Yeah.
The SNES port, despite downgrades, was also very well received critically and sold incredibly well.
And the Game Boy version.
Less positive reviews there, understandably. Too many compromises. KI2 Arcade was positive, sold well, but maybe didn't get quite the universal praise of the first. KI Gold on N64 was mixed.
Mixed? How so?
Reviews were all over the place. Some loved the graphics and depth, others found it relied on button mashing or defense, hadn't aged well compared to newer fighters. Average scores were decent, but not stellar.
And the 2013 reboot, it had a bit of a rocky start, content-wise.
Yeah, initial Metacritic was around 73, praised the mechanics, the tutorial, the rollback netcode, but criticized the limited launch roster. But as Seasons 2 and 3 came out, reception got much, much better. Metacritic jumped into the mid-80s. People recognized how solid the core gameplay was once the content filled out. Destructoid called it one of the most competent fighters by Season 3.
Commercially, how did they perform? Sales figures?
Original arcade KI sold thousands of units, top charts. The SNES version sold over 3 million copies worldwide, massive numbers. KI Gold on N64 sold respectively maybe around 600,000 in the US.
And the 2013 reboot being free-to-play?
Harder to track direct sales, but player engagement was huge. Over 6 million unique players by early 2016. That was the franchise's best month ever, apparently. Steam numbers are only part of the picture, but it clearly found a significant audience across Xbox and PC.
So summing it all up, Killer Instinct's legacy, what endures?
It's the innovation, really. Gameplay stuff like the combo breaker, the technical achievements, pre-rendered graphics back then, rollback netcode later, the memorable edgy characters and aesthetic. the sound.
Mm.
And the 2013 reboot proved you could successfully revive a classic fighter with a seasonal model, community focus, and top-tier online play. It maintained this dedicated following, fostered a competitive scene. It just has this unique blend of style, substance, and adaptability. That 10th anniversary update shows it's still got that spark.
A truly fantastic deep dive. Wow. From that arcade shockwave to the modern comeback, Killer Instinct has absolutely carved its own path in fighting game history.
Yeah, and it's amazing how something like the combo breaker, that core idea of active defense, just rippled out and influenced so many games that came after. That constant tension between offense and defense.
Totally. And that makes you think, right, consider this. What other small, maybe overlooked gameplay ideas in other genres have had those huge ripple effects, things that fundamentally changed how we play, maybe without us even realizing their origin?
That's a great question. Definitely something to mull over.
Food for thought. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring.